desk, and passed the Clarity Act, which is the market framework for the entire digital asset ecosystem that I wrote and passed the House with 78 Democrats, a strong bipartisan victory that I'm so proud of and all of my colleagues. I'm here at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio today for a meeting, and it's a privilege to be in this beautiful Air Force Museum. And you can see a great plane from Little Rock, a tail from the 1970s, a C-130. But I want to say thank you, Stand With Crypto. Now, you've got to help us get the job finished in the Senate. I'm committed to working with Chairman Tim Scott, Chairman John Bozeman, in getting the Clarity Act marked up in the Senate and create that market framework we need for clarity. Thanks for your help.
Policy and regulation in the United States. Together with industry leaders, we'll be exploring the path forward for digital assets, tackling tough questions like what will it take to get meaningful legislation passed in Washington? How can we balance breakthrough innovation with investor protection? And what does a clear competitive framework look like for the United States? My first guest joins us now, Coinbase Vice President of Legal and Global Head of Litigation, Ryan Van Grack. Good morning, Ryan.
Good morning, Jen. Good to talk to you.
Good to talk to you, too. I think you're the perfect guest to start off this hour block. Your career has followed a quite unique journey. You were at the White House under President Obama, the SEC as a senior advisor to the chair. You've been in the heart of TradFi as general counsel at Citadel Securities, and now you're leading litigation at Coinbase. I want you to kind of bring that all together for me to just set the foundation for this conversation. Talk to me about seeing that regulatory machine from the inside, understanding the core concerns of TradFi, and now, defending one of the big crypto leaders in the space. How is that shaping your approach in this role at Coinbase?
Yeah, well, thanks, Jen. It's great to talk about such an important issue, a very timely part of this critical debate. What's maybe most notable is during my time at the SEC, working under Chair Mary Jo White, what was a critical part of the regulatory ecosystem is an open dialogue with our market participants. There's a give and take. It's a two-way street where you want regulators to get input from the industry, from investors, and you want the regulators to be educating the market participants to understand the rules of the road and how things should operate. What's been most notable during my time from the SEC all the way through to my time at Coinbase is that two-way street has been broken over the last several years, where you didn't have a regulator who was having that dialogue and learning from the industry and stakeholders so that they could properly regulate in the space. But refreshingly, over the last half a year, you've seen a sea change in how the regulator is operating, and we really, for the first time, had this ability to get robust clarity both among regulators and within legislation for the crypto industry.
I want to talk about your experience in TradFi for just a second. You know, a lot of the narrative I've heard, a lot of the conversations I've had kind of behind the scenes said, you know, we got stablecoin legislation seemingly so quickly because TradFi was interested in it. But on the other hand, TradFi wasn't really playing in crypto because we didn't have regulation. Like, was TradFi the missing piece here from your perspective?
That's what's TradFi is the missing piece. But yeah, as a lawyer, as someone who's worked in TradFi, and as a regulator, regulatory uncertainty creates regulatory risk. If you don't know the rules of the road, you're naturally reluctant to engage in the space. And that's not just TradFi, that's crypto. It's also investors and consumers. They want to know where the lines are to be drawn and that people are following those lines. And so I think everyone benefits, TradFi and non, from having clarity. And so, yes, I think getting a robust, comprehensive framework is going to help facilitate TradFi getting more involved in the space, but you're already seeing meaningful steps in that direction across the TradFi landscape as people become more familiar and comfortable with the space.
You brought up clarity there. I know in your recent Senate testimony, you outlined 3 pillars for effective legislation. Clarity is one of them, uniformity and simplicity. Can you just unpack those 3 pillars for me? And there's one I want to hit on after you do that.
Oh, I'm scared which of the 3.
No, I think you're going to enjoy it.
But look, clarity, just out of the gate, clarity is critical because it's going to protect investors, it's going to empower innovators, and it's going to allow America to finally lead on this global issue. Uniformity is important because in the absence of us having one uniform, clear rule of the road, you have a patchwork of states, for example, that have bespoke and often contradictory ways to regulate the space. And simplicity is critical because I may be a lawyer and I get paid by the hour, but you shouldn't have to hire an army of lawyers to understand the rules of the road. That really sucks the life out of innovation and it confuses investors. And so I think if you keep those 3 pillars in mind, and what we've seen at Congress is fidelity to those concepts, you're going to end up with a regime that is really going to benefit all market participants and stakeholders.
I mean, you said that hiring a legal team can suck the life out of innovation. It can also be very expensive. I think we saw some of those numbers published in several different publications from companies like Ripple and I think even Coinbase on how much money these firms are spending to defend themselves. It can really put a small startup under and really stifle innovation in that way. And so I think that's a really great point that you made there. The pillar I wanted to touch on was uniformity, because this is a conversation I have with a lot of the guests who join my show, is this differentiation between federal regulation and state regulation, and what a lack of progress on the federal level actually means for crypto companies. And I'm not sure that many understand that. So do you want to break that down a little bit more for me? What does it mean for a company like Coinbase to not have something like clarity make it to the finish line?
Yeah, so if we can pull on the thread about in the absence of clarity, what that means. A good example of that is the fact that Coinbase was sued by the Oregon Attorney General earlier this year as a revival of the SEC's case against Coinbase, which was previously dismissed with prejudice. The reason that's noteworthy is because that lawsuit was brought in Oregon, even though the federal securities regulator had clearly spoken on this issue and deemed Coinbase not to be violating the rules. And you have unprecedented progress in Congress on a bipartisan basis to advance market structure legislation. I can't think of a more kind of illogical and unreasonable time for a state to be asserting itself when the federal government has made very clear it's their prerogative, but it's not just the fact that that's happening. And as you know, Jen, that it's costly to defend it. It's the impact if the Oregon AG is successful. Because if the Oregon AG had it his way, if you are in Oregon, you would not be allowed to participate in the crypto economy. You cannot buy and sell crypto. You would have a moat drawn around you from the rest of the country and the rest of the world. And I do not see how that is protecting Oregonians or investors. It is just depriving them of an opportunity that would otherwise be extended to the residents of 49 states.
I guess there's another risk as well, is that if Oregon is successful in a case, in this case, or a case like this, that other states might follow suit. Is that something that you're concerned about?
Well, look, it's what's notable is two things, Jen. No one has actually followed suit from the Oregon AG. He filed this lawsuit, but others, I think, recognized that the federal government, has this is their purview, and they are making meaningful, visible, important bipartisan steps to advance that conversation, including the Clarity Act passing on a bipartisan basis in the House. But yes, I think it's fair that in the absence of comprehensive market structure legislation, you continue to run the risk of other states trying to copy what Oregon did and assert itself and harm their own residents and prevent them from participating in the crypto industry. So it's critical that we get this market structure legislation across the finish line. I think it's worth noting, Jen, that we've never been closer. This issue has never been more potent and more bipartisan. The successes of the crypto voter are unmistakable, but we are not done. We are on the 1 yard line. And if we can act collectively and coherently and push market structure legislation across the finish line, the complaints and ills and harms of the last few years can truly be behind us. And we can allow this entire country and innovators and consumers to benefit from this, once in a generation technology.
There's one big question on everyone's mind, and it is market structure going to get across the finish line before midterms? Because if it doesn't, some other challenges get introduced. Do you think it's going to get across the line before midterms?
I think this is a question of when, not if, we're going to see crypto clarity. I am an optimist, and I think the answer is yes. And that's because I think we're entering a virtuous cycle of clarity. And I use clarity with the lowercase c. And that's because what you've seen from Congress and regulators over the last several months is a genuine effort to learn. They've engaged all stakeholders through roundtables, through requests for information, through testimony from all walks of life. And that is empowering because they are now poised with all that information to truly provide regulatory and legislative clarity. You see that momentum building, and you see it building on a bipartisan basis. And I don't see anything so far that seems to be stopping that momentum. But admittedly, Jen, I don't think we can take it for granted. Legislation is hard. It requires negotiation. It requires engagement. And so now is not the time to take our foot off the gas. Now is the time to lean in over the next few weeks and make sure that this fall we can get comprehensive market structure legislation passed in Congress.
Ryan, it's been such a pleasure having this conversation with you. Thanks for kicking off the hour with me. And I believe we'll see you at our regulation and policy event on September 10th.
Looking forward to it. Thanks. Take care.
That was Coinbase Vice President of Legal and Global Head of Litigation, Ryan Van Grack. Like I just mentioned, Ryan will be joining CoinDesk on September 10th for our policy and regulation event in Washington, D.C., designed for general counsels, compliance officers, and regulatory executives to meet with public officials responsible for crypto legislation and oversight. You can register today at policy-regulation.coindesk.com. The price of passes increases tomorrow, so register with the code SWC15 to save 15%. Okay, now we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be with Blockchain Association CEO Summer Mersinger. And welcome back. I'm Jen Sinesi, senior anchor at CoinDesk, and we are coming to you live on CoinDesk and Stand with Crypto's platforms as we kick off the conversation on crypto regulation policy. I welcome my next guest now, Blockchain Association CEO and former CFTC Commissioner, Summer Mersinger. Hey, Summer.
Hi, how are you doing this morning?
I am doing well. We are having a lot of important conversations this morning. We just wrapped up with Ryan, but I want to come to you now for folks who knew you as CFTC Commissioner and are now getting introduced to you as the CEO of the Blockchain Association. Tell us a little bit about the Blockchain Association's role in shaping policy and advancing the conversation on digital assets in Washington.
Blockchain Association really serves as a collective voice for the crypto industry. Our goal is to work with policymakers, be a resource, and help them create policies that are pro-innovation and really help the United States be the leader in crypto of the world.
Talk to me a little bit about what you think needs to happen to advance regulation and policy in the United States. I was just talking to Ryan about market structure and the importance of that passing. But from your perspective, I mean, what needs to happen? What kind of impact do you hope to make in this new role?
Well, market structure is critical. Just start kind of stepping back, we passed the Genius Act out of Congress and it was signed into law. That was the first crypto legislation ever to be signed into law in the United States. We have a lot of great momentum with the industry and with lawmakers right now. Market structure is critical for our members. Right now, they are all trying to work through a patchwork of state regulations. There's lack of clarity, really no pro-innovative rules of the road, and the market structure bill will really provide that framework so that these companies can operate on a federal level and have certainty and be able to bring their ingenuity, their innovation onshore in the United States and really, grow this industry more than it's already grown.
You talk about this state patchwork, and I just want to break that down for our audience. What does this introduce for crypto investors and crypto consumers with a lack of clarity and this kind of state patchwork that you just described?
Yeah, what the state patchwork really, these money transmitter license that are in each state, they really were not fit for purpose when you think about crypto. So there's a number of things. It's very different across each state. It's very difficult to navigate, and some of the consumer protections that you would expect are not there. So the idea is if you have a federal framework, you can come into the United States, you can register at a federal level, and you will have those consumer protections in place and not have to try to figure out each state's licensing regime. There's also a number of other kind of important laws and requirements that come with a federal registration. And that really is just going to make these markets safer for consumers and better for the United States.
You and I have talked about this before, I believe, but I think it's important to bring to this conversation with the new market structure bill. The CFTC is set to take on a bigger role in regulating the industry. Just to talk to me a little bit about the CFTC's resources, your experience there. Are they set to take on this responsibility, and do any changes need to be made?
So CFTC is one of those small regulators that really punches above its weight. I think people tend to say that maybe they're too small or they're not resourced enough, but I think they underestimate how much the agency is already overseeing. There's like $6 trillion in notional value in the derivatives markets, and that is all regulated by the CFTC. They are actually experts in this area. They have been overseeing crypto-related futures contracts since, I believe, 2018. So they have really been in this space, monitoring these markets, doing this work for a number of years. It's a principles-based regulator, which means there's a lot of flexibility that helps with new technology and new innovation. And they really are the best suited regulator for this space. 90% of the digital assets are commodities. So it only makes sense that the CFTC oversee this space. And I always say when people are commenting on their lack of resources or they're too small, look at what they're able to do now with the resources they have. I have no doubt that agency is fully prepared to take on the role of the crypto spot market regulator.
Is there a challenge presented if legislation doesn't pass quickly and the CFTC still doesn't have a chair?
Yeah, of course. You want permanent leadership in these agencies. That's very important. It's really important to our association that we see Brian Quintenz become the permanent chair of the agency. He's very pro crypto. He has a lot of experience, and we know that he will really move things forward. If we don't have market structure, there is going to be a lot of focus on the agencies to do what they can within their existing statutes. And so it's critically important to have someone like Brian Quintenz in place to be able to maneuver that rulemaking, those staff guidances, whatever needs to be done to try to frame, create some sort of framework without the federal, if there's no federal legislation.
Now, looking forward to the next 12 to 18 months, talk to me a little bit about what the Blockchain Association is focused on.
Yeah, it's been a crazy couple of months since I started. I think right off the bat, it was, we signed Genius Act into law. We've been working on market structure, working closely with the House to get clarity through. Right now, we are working very closely with the Senate on their version. And I think the next 12 to 18 months, we're going all in to try to get this market structure legislation done. Hopefully it gets done before the end of the year. And then we really turn to kind of the rulemaking phase where we have to work very closely with the implementing agencies to make sure the rules reflect the spirit of the bill, make sure that somehow the rules don't push back the innovation and the idea that we want a framework that allows this ingenuity and innovation to thrive, and just make sure that the crypto industry is well represented throughout that regulatory process. So that's really the next 12 to 18 months, and it's going to be a busy time.
You just mentioned clarity, and then you mentioned working with the Senate on their version. I know that there are two versions of market structure right now that eventually have to become one. There is some different commentary there, many saying that they are vastly different, and some saying actually, if you look at them, they're not that different. Talk to me a little bit about the difference between the two and how they become one, just to help our audience kind of understand that process.
Yeah, it's actually a pretty common process in Congress. I know it sounds daunting, but they do it all the time. The House obviously has their past Clarity Act. They had great bipartisan support, and I think that gave them kind of a lot of credibility going into the Senate process. I think the Senate is going to track pretty closely to Clarity. We have seen some legislative text out of Senate Banking and a request for information from that committee. They're trying to craft their section, which will just be focused on the SEC. It sounds like they are working closely with their counterparts at Senate Ag. They're working closely with the House counterparts too. That's critical to have the staff of the House and the Senate working together. That's how you get a bill that can pass both bodies of Congress and become law. I've spoken to staff at Senate Banking and Senate Ag recently. They are all in. They are working on this through the night, and I really do expect to see a product that's not too far from clarity, but also something that both sides can agree is a good piece of legislation so that they can get it through both bodies of Congress and get it to the president's desk.
Summer, thanks so much for joining the show. It's always a pleasure speaking to you, and we're going to see you at the event on September 10th.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. That was Blockchain Association CEO and former CFTC Commissioner Summer Mersinger. Summer, like I just said, will be taking part in CoinDesk's policy and regulation event. Register today with the code SWC15 to save 15%. Prices increase tomorrow. We are going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be with TRM Labs Global Head of Policy, Ari Redboard. Welcome back. I'm now joined by TRM Labs Global Head of Policy, Ari Redbourn. Hey, Ari.
Jennifer, always great to see you and really looking forward to a conversation today.
Always great to see you too. Now, I want to talk about what you're doing at TRM Labs because we often kind of talk about the broader picture, the broader landscape, but I think what you're doing is kind of really important and adds a different facet to the conversation that we are having here. So I want to start here from your perspective. What is the state of financial crime and illicit finance, and where does crypto fall into that picture?
It's a really important question. And, I spend really all my time talking about illicit finance and crypto, but I think it's so important to level set. We put out a report every year on the crypto crime ecosystem, if you will. And overall illicit activity is always under 1% in the overall ecosystem. That is a very, very low number, significantly lower than the estimates in traditional finance. But I spend my entire life thinking about that 1% because those are often, existential threats. It's people losing their life savings to fraud and pig butchering scams. It's North Korea stealing 1.5 billion, from a cryptocurrency exchange to be used for weapons proliferation and other destabilizing activity. It's terrorist financiers experimenting with how to move funds using cryptocurrency at the speed of the internet. So while it is a very, very small amount, and I think it's so important to always start with that, there are a lot of very real threats. And at TRM, we work with law enforcement, with compliance teams at financial institutions, at cryptocurrency businesses to stop bad actors from taking advantage of transformative technology.
What are the most, I don't want to say common, but what are you mentioned North Korea hacking for large amounts of sums from crypto firms, but what are the most proliferate crimes that are happening right now?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. Look, we've seen billions of dollars, tens of billions in fraud and pig butchering type of scams over the last, couple of years. We've seen billions in these types of hacks against the ecosystem. But we're also seeing law enforcement fight back. The FBI has a program that they work with TRM on called Level Up, where they're literally they identify victims using on-chain and off-chain intelligence. They go to those victims and they warn them of what's potentially happening. And the reason I sort of really, are focused on scams in this conversation is it's something that affects really everybody, but certainly millions of Americans right now who are losing large amounts of money. And we really do see this is a huge issue, but we also see law enforcement using blockchain intelligence tools to identify victims, to go after bad actors. In a really great case recently, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia, which is part of the U.S. Department of Justice, filed a civil forfeiture action for over $200 million in illicit proceeds involved in pig butchering scams. But that means they were able to identify those funds, seize them back, and have Tether, which was the stablecoin issuer involved, reissue those funds to the government, which will ultimately get them back to victims in the forfeiture process. So if you ask me sort of what keeps me up at night, I hate that people are losing money in crypto. I hate that crypto is being used for scams and other types of illicit activity. But at the same time, what I love to see is the wins that law enforcement is having globally. One thing that we talk a lot about, you and I, over the years is, how do we build a safer financial system, whether that's through regulation, whether that's through compliance. And I think we're seeing is sort of all of this converge. We'll probably get to this in a moment, but the White House put out an excellent report a couple of weeks ago, 160 plus pages on really every aspect of the crypto ecosystem, right? Taxation, market structure, and then about 20 pages on illicit finance. And it kind of really got to the heart. It put some TRM data in there, quoting around that 1% of overall number, but then dug into, here are the real threats, and here's how we would recommend mitigating those risks.
What were those real threats that the White House outlined in that report?
Yeah, it's a great question, and really some of those that I've already mentioned and that we focus on. Ransomware, right? Crypto does not it does not enable ransomware, but it is the means of value transfer in so many of those exploits. So there's a ransomware attack. Oftentimes the payment is in Bitcoin. North Korea hacks was a focus of the report. Scams, terrorist financing, child sexual abuse material. But what I kind of go back to is like, people throw around this term crypto crime, and I think I even did a moment ago. But the reality is that like every crime is a financial crime. And as the crypto ecosystem grows, and it is growing at an extraordinary clip right now, not only, record-setting Bitcoin, but also with the regulatory frameworks globally, the ecosystem is growing. We're going to see more and more criminal activity because bad guys go to where the money is. And right now the money is in crypto. But I thought the report did a really good job of here, we're gonna show you this data to level set on the problem. We're then going to go into the way bad actors are engaging with crypto, and we're going to talk about our recommendations. Part of the recommendations were public-private partnerships. And I don't throw that around. I know a lot of people sort of throw this idea around as a solution to everything, but to me, it's very real. It's very operational. It's how do we get every cryptocurrency business in the world together, working closely with law enforcement to stop bad actors from using their platforms to off-ramp funds. It's very operational. And this report, I think, really talked about the operational nature of it. How do we interdict funds in the Bybit hack? How do we interdict ransomware proceeds or scam proceeds? And then they also talked about the importance of making sure that every investigator out there has the tools, has the training, because the ecosystem is growing and it's going to be a part of every investigation. So I thought the report did a really good job of both sort of setting out the problem, but also really talking about, hey, here are some recommendations. Some of them were legislative. Can we get a hold law that would allow cryptocurrency exchanges to hold funds in an investigation for a certain amount of time without liability? Very, very sort of legislative, but a lot were very strategic, very operational. How do we give law enforcement, how do we give regulators the tools that they need to go after bad actors?
Was there a time when crypto firms didn't want to work with law enforcement?
It's interesting. I was a prosecutor for about 11 years at the Department of Justice. And towards the end of my time there, I mean, crypto really, I've been at TRM for over 5 years now, or around 5 years. I think the ecosystem has grown just exponentially in that time. But I would have said that crypto firms, even in those early days, were some of the best at engaging with law enforcement. In large part because it was a young, small, nascent industry that really wanted to do the right thing. So, my take has always been a little different than other folks I hear out there. I think that sort of like certainly the larger crypto firms where much of the liquidity is today have really always been very responsive, in some ways more nimble than large traditional financial institution in responding to law enforcement process. I would say that like in part when you're small, when you're technology driven, you're a little bit more nimble, you're using technology, you're wanting to engage. So I'd say that like there's a very, very large part, the majority of the ecosystem. And then again, like with everything else, you're always going to have, what I've referred to over the years is the illicit underbelly, where you do have non-compliant cryptocurrency exchanges. Many of those are in Russia and other jurisdictions where there's not, compliance controls are not encouraged. But some in the Middle East and elsewhere. But I think the reality is that a lot of the larger firms where much liquidity is today are really good at using tools like TRM, responding to law enforcement subpoena, having policies and procedures in place. So honestly, think the Coinbases, the Krakens, the Binances, the Geminis. They have large, robust compliance teams that, in some ways are very comparable to what large financial institutions have today.
Ari, do things get a little bit more complicated when we introduce AI into the mix?
It's such a great question, and it's been such a focus for me and for TRM recently. I testified a couple weeks ago in really the first ever hearing on Capitol Hill on AI crime before the House Judiciary Committee, and like really looking forward to more of those conversations. I think there are certain new crimes that AI enables, but I think most of what we're seeing right now is that AI is supercharging criminal activity that's existed before. We're seeing AI, scam networks use AI to scale their operations, right? Remove the human bottleneck from scam operations. We're seeing ransomware actors spin up ransomware variants or affiliates using AI agents. We're seeing nation state actors use AI to programmatically launder hacked and stolen funds. So I think what we're seeing right now is AI supercharging crime the same way we're seeing AI supercharge everything that we're doing. I'm sure, in your work as a journalist, you're using it. I'm certainly using it. So I think right now what we're seeing is bad actors as early adopters of really truly transformative technology. And at TRM, we are just so focused on using it at every layer of our blockchain intelligence tool and beyond to meet bad actors where they are, to move faster. So when I think of AI, I think of it as a race where bad guys are early adopters, but we're building tools for law enforcement, national security agencies, compliance teams to move just as fast as the bad actors are. And I think that's what we're going to see it play out over the next few years. I've never seen anything move as quickly as this technology in my lifetime. And we're seeing both criminal use cases and also law enforcement type use cases as well.
Ari, we got to wrap, but I asked everyone this, and I want to ask you too, over the next 12 to 18 months, what's your main focus when it comes to the conversation we had today?
I have never in my life had a main focus, and that's because we're in crypto.
Yeah,
So,
we are
like,
focused on everything.
I really need to focus a lot more. At least that's what my wife tells me. But I would say that like I am so excited right now about the way financial institutions are really engaging in this space. I think what's happening on Capitol Hill is absolutely awesome, but none of it matters unless we see sort of this widespread institutional adoption. And I think we're seeing it in droves right now. We are having conversations with every major bank in the United States and then globally on how they can safely offer crypto assets to customers, custody crypto assets, how they can, launch blockchains and assets. So I think that to me is really the most extraordinary thing. And I think the legislation will help with that. But it's the builders, it's the innovators, and I think most large financial institutions have that function today. So it's really, really exciting.
Ari, thanks so much for joining me. It is always a pleasure. And I got to say, one day we'll get me in the running club.
We never talk without that. And
I know, we got to talk.
Miami Beach is fabulous for running. It's going to be perfect weather. You and I are going out there. We're going to do this.
All right, maybe our audience can join us for the TRM Labs running club at Consensus Miami.
I'm in. Jennifer, you're the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ari. That was TRM Labs Global Head of Policy, Ari Redboard. Ari will also be joining us for CoinDesk's regulation and policy event on September 10th in Washington, D.C. This is an event designed for general counsels, compliance officers, and regulatory executives to meet with public officials responsible for crypto legislation and oversight. If you would like to attend, you can register at policy-regulation.coindesk.com. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be with A16Z Senior Advisor, Chairman Patrick McHenry. Final guest joins us now, A16Z Senior Advisor and former House Financial Services Committee Chairman Patrick McHenry. Hello, Chairman.
Hey, how are you, Jen? Thanks for having me.
I'm doing well, thanks. Thanks for joining the broadcast. Now, I have to start here, and I've asked you this before, but a lot has happened since the last time I asked you this. Now that Genius Act has been signed and clarity is making its way through the process, do you have FOMO?
A little bit.
I bet.
I mean, so I spent years working on policy that I wasn't able to complete before I retired from Congress, before I finished my last term. I mean, I got to serve 20 years. I got to be the chairman of the committee, and I got to move what was FIT 21, now the Clarity Act. We got to move that through the committee and through the House floor and get a big vote. So I think we moved the ball forward, but it's really great to see the progress that Senator Haggerty, Senator Lummis, Senator Gallego, plus my friend French Hill, chair of the Financial Services Committee, and so many more in the House. The products have been able to move and get to the president's desk. So pretty awesome to see that. A little bit of FOMO.
I asked you about how long it takes to get these things across the finish line, and you said things move very slow in government. And it feels like things have been moving very quickly lately. Talk to me a little bit about your observations of how legislation has been moving, how some initiatives like Project Crypto at the SEC have been moving, and what folks at home who are watching should be taking away from this and be watching out for.
So there's this, as a House member, we always talk smack about the Senate. And so we were fond of saying that the Senate on an average day does nothing. But in an average week, they do nothing. But in a week's time, they could do what is a backup of 6 months. They can clear. So things work at this differential pace in Washington legislatively. Things are slow, and then things happen in an instant and change everything. So this year's been different, though. Trump 47, President Trump has led at a different pace. On executive orders, he's already issued more executive orders in his first 7 months in office than Joe Biden did in 4 years in office. Joe Biden had 5 bills signed into law by this time in his first year in office. President Trump has had 26 bills signed into law. Things are moving at a much more rapid pace generally, but on specifics here on crypto, this is an unprecedented pace. The work that you see from Commissioner Peirce at the SEC, now Chair Atkins taking the reins and running the show, they're working at a pace that they've not worked in a generation. So the SEC is moving very quickly, the Hill is moving very fast, and the president's demanding action that is even faster than that. And this is such a great, awesome thing for crypto, especially after the crypto winter that we suffered under.
Should we be concerned that we don't have a CFTC chair and the commissioners are reducing as time goes on?
I think it's a major concern. Look, you've got a great, credible nominee, and Brian Quintenz, to lead the CFTC. He deserves a vote, and he deserves to get going so that this agency can get on with rulemaking. It's going to be very important once we pass the Clarity Act into law that you have somebody that's there to get going and writing the regs so that we can actually have this great deployment that can happen post new law. The CFTC is lagging behind. They're not fully up to steam because they don't have enough commissioners to do that. You don't have a confirmed chairman like you do with the SEC, which means that we're going to have a crypto policy set that's more weighted to the Securities Exchange Commission. Which, I mean, for those of us that are pro crypto, I mean, to think about the SEC having the disproportionate power here over crypto, I don't think is a good thing. And so we need to get Quintenz confirmed and get him seated so we can actually have a nice balanced set of regulation here, not one that's just geared toward the SEC.
Well, what do you make of the news that it was the White House who's delayed the process for Quintenz? There were some reports that came out that there maybe were some industry leaders involved in this delay. Like, just help make sense of that for folks who are reading those stories.
Well, look, I mean, we're in an atmosphere where, the day before the election, crypto was on the ballot and knew that they were on the ballot. You had crypto executives that either had a business if the election went right, or had no business if the election did not go correctly. So we're going from basically jail time the day before the election under the Biden and Gensler regime to being hosted at the White House, those executives hosted at the White House, meeting with the president directly, and getting policies that are now the envy of the world in crypto. And so now you have crypto executives wanting perfection rather than good. And so what we want to do here is keep moving at a pace where we get superior policy, not perfect, but superior policy, and get it done quickly, because things can change very quickly in Washington. If then can overtake the prioritization of crypto that this administration is giving us. We don't want that. We don't want an economic challenge or a national security challenge to deprioritize crypto from this administration. We don't want those events to overtake us. So we got to push hard to get good policy, superior policy, but not perfect policy. And I think this falls into one of those buckets of trying to get perfect rather than really good.
I think you put that in the perfect way. I want to turn now to your role at A16Z as senior advisor. Talk to me a little bit from that position. What are some of the biggest regulatory concerns for crypto companies now?
So clarity. We want clarity under law, clear rules, so we know the market structure, and so we can get mass adoption. What we're seeing right now are traditional financial firms coming in hot and heavy to the world of crypto. That's driving a lot of deployment of capital, a lot of new products oriented to TradFi, trying to understand and come to terms with crypto. You see that in a major way. So those firms, those traditional finance firms, want real clarity of regulation, not just law, but regulation. So the finer points of that. Second, you see this move at the Securities Exchange Commission around tokenizing real world assets. How do you do that? The complexity around that market structure on tokenization for securities and real world assets is a big thing. Third, DeFi. The world of DeFi is the same as it was 2 years ago, 4 years ago. The policy set around DeFi is dramatically different. We have regulators that want to seek to understand the benefits, not kill it before they understand it. That's a major change for the Biden administration and all of their regulators, not just Gensler, the SEC. So to take it from that regime that was anti-DeFi before they even understood the benefits of it, to this one that wants to seek to get it right and understand how you have proper regulation so DeFi can flourish here in the United States. I think those are the top priority sets I hear from portfolio companies and innovators here and the marketplace generally.
Chairman, thanks so much for joining me on the broadcast. As always, it was a pleasure hearing your insights.
Great to be with you. Thanks, Jen.
That was A16Z Senior Advisor and former House Financial Services Committee Chairman Patrick McHenry. That's it for me. There is still a full day of conversations around crypto regulation and policy coming up. If you want to hear directly from the public officials changing the course of crypto regulation for years to come, you can do that with us on September 10th at CoinDesk's Policy and Regulation event. Don't miss the single best opportunity this fall to engage directly with leaders from the public and private sectors and have a year's worth of critical conversations in just one day. The price of registration increases tomorrow. You can get 15% off today with SWC 15. Again, thank you all for watching, and thank you to the guests who joined me today. I'm Jen Sanasi for CoinDesk. We will see you soon.